Good evening. We will be reading from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And tonight we're going to be reading the section of chapter 13, The Master and M. I'll begin with the chant. Tavatat amrita tattva jivanam kabibiriditam kamashapaham Shravana Mangalam Shri Madatmatam Bhuvi Granantiye Buridachanaye Naha. O Lord, the stories of your divine acts are an embodiment of nectar which brings life and hope to the people suffering from the pain of separation. The wise Mahatmas, the devoted poets, have sung its praises. By merely listening to them, it removes all sins and sufferings and bestows the supreme bliss and welfare as well. The reciters of the Katha are the large-hearted benefactors and give the utmost to this universe. So before I actually begin the reading this evening, I'd like to read you a little section from Swami Triyananda's letters, where he describes meeting Sri Ramakrishna and what it was like. The thing about the gospel is that it's full of joy, and actually M is very good at painting the picture of the whole environment and of Sri Ramakrishna himself. And the more you read it, the more you understand what kind of bliss the people were in who were with him and listening to him speak. So I'll begin with this short letter where he describes how he saw Sri Ramakrishna. I am pleased to observe your power of discrimination. You wanted to know about my early life, but I don't like to talk about it. I first saw Sri Ramakrishna at Dinanath Basu's house in Bagh Bazar. That was a long, long time ago. In those days, the master would frequently go into samadhi. About that time, Keshab Chandra Sen had become acquainted with him. Kalinath Basu, Dinanath's brother, was a follower of Keshab Sen. He happened to see Sri Ramakrishna and was deeply impressed, so he asked his brother Dinanath to bring Sri Ramakrishna to their house. That is how the master came to visit Bagh Bazar. We were all young, about 13 or 14 years old. People referred to Sri Ramakrishna as the Paramahamsa, so they were talking about the Paramahamsa's visit. Some other boys and I were curious, and so we went to see him. We saw a carriage with two men in it stop in front of Dinanath's house. Immediately, people around began to say, "The Paramahamsa has come, the Paramahamsa has come," and began moving toward the carriage. First, one of the men in the carriage got down. This is Hridayam, Sri Ramakrishna's nephew. He was well built, and there was a large vermilion mark on his forehead and a golden amulet tied around his right arm. Looking at him, one felt that he was very strong and an active person. He stood close to the carriage and helped the other person alight. The other man appeared very thin. He had a shirt on, and his cloth was securely tied around his waist. One of his feet was on the step of the carriage, and the other was inside. He was in a semi-conscious state, and it seemed as if someone quite drunk were being taken out of the carriage. But when he got down, what a wonderful sight. There was an indescribable radiance over his face. I thought, I've heard from the scriptures about the great sage Sukadev. Is he the same Sukadev? By that time, many others had joined them, and they were taken to the second floor of the house. I followed them. When the Paramahamsa became a little conscious of the outer world, he opened his eyes and saw a large picture of Mother Kali on the wall. Immediately he saluted her and started to sing in a soul-bewitching manner. It stirred a wave of devotion in all who gathered there. The song expressed the idea that Kali and Krishna are identical. Quote, "O mother, for Yashoda thou would danced when she called thee her precious blue jewel." End of quote. It is impossible to describe the extraordinary feeling this song aroused in everyone. 2 or 3 years later, I went to Dakshineswar and saw Sri Ram, a Krishna, in his room. So this was Turiyanada's first meeting with Sri Ramakrishna, and it gives you a picture of him. Many times in this gospel, we will also see him described. So we're starting now on chapter 13, as I said, The Master and M. August 19th, 1883. It was Sunday, the first day after the full moon. Sri Ramakrishna was resting after his noon meal. The midday offering had been made in the temples, and the temple doors were closed. In the early afternoon, the master sat up on the small couch in his room. M prostrated himself before him and sat on the floor. The master was talking to him on the philosophy of Vedanta. Master to M. Self-knowledge is discussed in the Ashtavarka Samhita. The non-dualists say, Soham, that is, I am the Supreme Self. This is the view of the sannyasis of the Vedantic school. But this is not the right attitude for householders who are conscious of doing everything for themselves. That being so, how can they declare, I am that? The actionless Supreme Self. According to the non-dualists, the self is unattached. Good and bad, virtue and vice, and the other pairs of opposites cannot in any way injure the self, though they undoubtedly afflict those who have identified themselves with their bodies. Smoke soils the wall, certainly, but it cannot in any way affect the akasha, the space. Following the Vedantists of this class, Krishna Kishore used to say, I am Ka, meaning akasha. Being a great devotee, he could say that with some justification, but it is not becoming for others to do so. So in a way, he's setting the stage for M himself, because M was a householder, and he's telling him how he should look on God. But to feel that one is a free soul is very good. By constantly repeating, I am free, a man becomes free. On the other hand, by constantly repeating, I am bound, he certainly becomes bound to worldliness. The fool who says, I am a sinner, verily drowns himself in worldliness. One should rather say, I have chanted the name of God, how can I be a sinner? How can I be bound? To M. You see, I am very much depressed today. Hriday has written me that he's ill. Why should I feel dejected about it? Is it because of Maya or Daya? M could not find suitable words for a reply and remained silent. So he's asking him, is it because of bondage or is it because of compassion? And is it something good or is it something bad that I feel this kind of dejection that Hriday isn't here to help me? Master, do you know what Maya is? It is attachment to relatives, parents, brothers and sister, wife and children, nephew and niece. Daya means love for all, created beings. Now what is this, my feeling about Hriday? Is it Maya or Daya? Hriday actually was a nephew of Sri Ramakrishna, so he was related in the family as well. But Hriday did so much for me. He serves me wholeheartedly and nursed me when I was ill. But later he tormented me also. The torment became so unbearable, I was about to commit suicide by jumping into the Ganges from the top of the embankment. But he did so much to serve me as well. Now my mind will be at rest if he gets some money. But who shall I ask for it? Who likes to speak about such things to rich visitors? At 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Adar Sen and Balaram arrived. After saluting Sri Ramakrishna, they sat on the floor and asked him if he was well. The master said, "Yes, I'm well physically, but a little troubled in mind." He did not refer to Hriday and his troubles. The conversation turned to the goddess Simhavahini. Master: "Yes, I visited the goddess. She is worshipped by one of the branches of the Malak family in Calcutta. This branch of the family is now in straitened circumstances, and the house they live in is dilapidated. The walls and floors are spotted with moss and pigeon droppings, and the cement and plaster are crumbling. But other branches of the Malak family are well off. This branch has no sign of prosperity to M. Well, what does that signify?" M remained silent. Master: "The thing is that everyone must reap the result of his past karma. One must admit the influence of tendencies inherent from other births and the result of the prarabdha karma. Nevertheless, in that dilapidated house, I saw the face of the goddess radiating a divine light. One must believe in the divine presence in the image." There is an actual temple for Simhavahini that's very close to that place. You can visit it. Once I went to Vishnupur. The Raja of that place has several fine temples. In one of them, there is an image of the Divine Mother called Mrinmayi. And there's a legend about this goddess. And I will read that to you also. I'll have to go over to another page in order to give you this. Okay. By dint of austerity, a man may obtain God as his son. By the roadside on the way to Kamarpukur at Ranjit Raya's house, Bhagavati, the Divine Mother, was born as his daughter. Even now, people hold an annual festival there in the month of Chaitra in honor of this divine daughter. I feel very much like going there. Ranjit Raya was the landlord of that part of the country. Through the power of his tapasya, he obtained the Divine Mother as his daughter. He was very fond of her, and she too was much attached to him. She hardly left his presence. One day, Ranjit Raya was engaged in the duties of his estate. He was very busy. The girl, with childlike nature, was constantly interrupting him, saying, "Father, what is this? What is that?" Ranjit Raya tried with sweet words to persuade her not to disturb him and said, "My child, please leave me alone. I have much work to do." But the girl would not go away. At last, absent-mindedly, the father said, "Get out of here." On this pretext, she left home. A peddler of conch shell bracelets was going along the road. From him, she took a pair of bracelets on her wrists. When he asked her for the price, she said he could get the money from a certain box in her home. Then she disappeared. Nobody saw her again. In the meantime, the peddler came to the house and asked for the price of the bracelets. When she was not to be found at home, her relatives began to run about looking for her. Ranjit Rai sent people in all directions to search for her. The money owed to the peddler was found in a box, just as she had indicated. Ranjit Rai was weeping bitterly when people came running to him and said that they had noticed something in the lake. They all ran there and saw an arm with conch shell bracelets on the wrists being swayed above the water. A moment afterward, it disappeared. Even now, people worship the Divine Mother at the time of her annual festival. So this is the story that is associated with Mrinmai. Near that lake, I went into samadhi, though I had not yet seen the image in the temple. In that state, I saw the divine form from the waist up, rising up from the water. In the meantime, other devotees had arrived. Someone referred to the political revolution and civil war in Kabul. A devotee said that Yaqub Khan, the Amir of Afghanistan, had been deposed. He told the master that the Amir was a great devotee of God. Master, but you must remember that pleasure and pain are the characteristics of an embodied state. In Kavi Khan's Chandi, it is written that Kaluvir was sent to prison and a heavy stone placed on his chest. Yet Kalu was born as a result of a boon from the Divine Mother of the universe. Thus, pleasure and pain are inevitable when a soul accepts a body. Again, take the case of Sri Manta, who was a great devotee. Though his mother, Kulana, was very much devoted to the Divine Mother, there was no end to his troubles. He was almost beheaded. There is also the instance of the woodcutter, who was a great lover of the Divine Mother. She appeared before him and showed him much grace and love. But he had to continue his profession of woodcutting and earn his livelihood by that arduous work. Again, while Devaki, Krishna's mother, was in prison, she had the vision of God himself, endowed with 4 arms, holding mace, discus, conch, shell, and lotus. But with all that, she could not get out of the prison. M. Why speak only of getting out of prison? This body is the source of all our troubles. Devaki should have been freed from the body. Master, the truth is that one must reap the result of the prarabdha karma. The body must remain as long as the results of past actions do not completely wear it away. Once a blind man bathed in the Ganges, and as a result was freed from his sin, but his blindness remained all the same. It was because of his evil deeds in his past birth that he had to undergo that affliction. M. Yes, sir. The arrow has already left the bow and is beyond our control. This is a reference to the idea of karma, that prarabdha, there are 3 kinds of karma listed there. And the example is given of a bow and arrow. If you have a bow and you have one arrow that's in the bow and one that you've already shot and some that are in the quiver. So the one that is already shot is what is called, he's referring to here as prarabdha karma. That's what you are reaping the results of in this birth. And it can be good, it can be bad, many things. But it's very hard to control that because it's already left the bow. But Holy Mother says even that, if you do japa and things, can be lessened, the effect of that. If you were supposed to get a cut or lose your hand, you might just get a cut on the wrist instead, if you're a devotee. So you can lessen that. The one that's in the bow is the one that you're doing in this life, and you're working on that. So by offering all your actions and things, you can also get rid of the effects of the one that's in the bow and make sure that it doesn't go astray. The ones that are in the back are things that are stored up for later, and they say a illumined guru can get rid of these. Or some people think you can bring it to consciousness and burn them there also in certain states of yoga. Anyway, that's just a little background about karma. Master, however much a bhakta may experience physical joy and sorrow, he always has knowledge and the treasure of divine love. This treasure never leaves him. Take the Pandava brothers, for instance. Though they suffer many calamities, they did not lose their consciousness of God even once. Where can you find men like them, endowed with so much knowledge and devotion? Just then, Narendra and Colonel Vishwanath Upapadhyaya entered the room. Narendra was then 22 years old and studying in a college. They saluted the master and sat down. The master requested Narendra to sing. The tampura hung on the west wall of the room. The devotees fixed their eyes on Narendra, and he began to tune the drums. Master to Narendra, the drums don't sound as well as before. Captain, they are now full, therefore they are quiet like a vessel filled with water. Or they are like a holy man who remains silent when his heart is full of God consciousness. Master, but what about sages like Narada? Captain, they talked because they were moved by the sufferings of others. You are right. After attaining samadhi, Narada, Sukdev, and others came down a few steps, as it were, to the plane of normal consciousness and broke their silence out of compassion for the suffering of others and to help them. Narendra began to sing, "Oh, when will dawn for me that day of blessedness, when he who is all good, all beauty, and all truth will light up the innermost shrine of my heart? When shall I sink at last, ever beholding him in that ocean of delight?" No sooner had the master heard the words of the song than he went into a deep samadhi. He sat with folded hands, facing the east. His body was erect and his mind completely bereft of worldly consciousness. His breath had almost stopped. With unwinking eyes, he sat motionless as a picture on canvas. His mind had dived deep in the ocean of God's beauty. So here we have another picture of Sri Ramakrishna. Holy Mother once said, actually, that she saw Sri Ramakrishna go into samadhi many times in all stages of samadhi, and he always had a small smile on his face, too. So you can picture him with a smile sitting in this state. Narendra left the room and went to the east veranda where Hazra was seated on a blanket with a rosary in his hand. They fell to talking. Other devotees arrived. The master came down from samadhi and looked around. He could not find Narendra. The tampura was lying on the floor. He noticed that the earnest eyes of the devotees were riveted on him. The master referred to Narendra. He has lighted the fire. Now it doesn't matter if he stays in the room or goes out. Master and the other devotees, attribute to yourselves the bliss of God consciousness, then you too will experience ineffable joy. The bliss of God consciousness always exists in you. It is only hidden by the veiling and projecting power of Maya. The less you are attached to the world, the more you love God. So there's a footnote that says the veiling power of Maya hides the reality, and the projected power of Maya creates the names and forms of the universe. So these are considered to be the two powers of Maya, and it's called Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. And the veiling power is the ignorance that covers this reality so that we take it to be real, and we don't see the divine that is behind it and the blissful consciousness that also is behind it. And the Vikshepa Shakti is this projecting power of all the different forms and all the things that we see going on. And these are the two powers of Maya. It's said that when a man attains Jiva Mukti, he still will see the divine play, that projecting power, but that ignorance is gone. So he still sees one of the powers of Maya in front of him, but he knows that it's all the divine form of God. It's all blissful awareness and consciousness. I was quoting the other day a song that we used to sing in San Francisco, and I'll quote it here. O Lord, why hast thou created this world? What joy impelled thee? From whence came this creation? The sun, the moon, and the stars. All this is the Lord himself in divine joy of play. So that sort of expresses what he's talking about here. Captain, the farther you progress toward your home in Calcutta, the further you leave Benares behind. Again, the farther you proceed toward Benares, the farther you leave behind your home. Master, as Radha advanced toward Krishna, she could smell more and more the sweet fragrance of his body. The nearer you approach to God, the more you feel his love. As a river approaches the ocean, it increasingly feels the flow of the tides. The jnani experiences God consciousness within himself. It is like the upper Ganges flowing in only one direction. To him, the whole universe is illusory, like a dream. He's always established in the reality of the self. But with the lover of God, the case is different. His feeling does not flow only in one direction. He feels both the ebb tide and the flood tide of divine emotion. He laughs and weeps and dances and sings in the ecstasy of God. The lover of God likes to sport with him. In the ocean of God consciousness, he sometimes swims, sometimes he goes down, and sometimes rises to the surface, like pieces of ice in water. Everybody laughed. The jnani seeks to realize Brahman, but the ideal of the bhakta is personal God, a God endowed with omnipotence and with the 6 treasures. Yet Brahman and Shakti are in fact not different. That which is the blissful mother is again existence, knowledge, bliss absolute. They are like the gem and its luster. When one speaks of the luster of the gem, one thinks of the gem, and again, when one speaks of the gem, one refers to its luster. One cannot conceive of the luster of the gem without thinking of the gem, and one cannot conceive of the gem without thinking of its luster. Existence, knowledge, bliss absolute is one, and the only reality. But it is associated with different limiting adjuncts on account of the different degrees of its manifestation. That is why one finds various forms of God. The devotee sings, "O my divine mother, thou art all these." Whenever you see actions like creation, preservation, and dissolution, there is the manifestation of Shakti. Water is water, whether it is calm or full of waves and bubbles. The Absolute alone is the primordial energy which creates and preserves and destroys. Thus, it is the same captain, whether he remains inactive or performs his worship or pays a visit to the Governor General. Only we designate him by different names at different times. Captain, yes, sir, that is so. Master, I said these words to Keshab Sen. Captain, Keshab is not an Orthodox Hindu. He adopts manners and customs according to his own whim. He is a well-to-do gentleman and not a holy man. Master to the other devotees. Captain forbids me to go see Keshav. Master sharply. Why shouldn't I go see Keshav? You feel at ease when you go to the Governor General's house for money at that. And there's a footnote here. According to the Orthodox Hindu custom, an Englishman is a malecha and one outside the pale of Hindu society, and the touch of a malecha pollutes a Hindu. So he was asking him, well, you go to the governor's house and you're doing it for money. Keshav thinks of God and he chants his name. Isn't it you who are always saying that God himself has become the universe and all its living beings? Doesn't God dwell in Keshav as well? With these words, Master left the room abruptly and went to the northern veranda. Captain and the other devotees remained, waiting for his return. M, accompanied by the master to the veranda, where Narendra was talking with Hazra. Sri Ramakrishna knew that Hazra always indulged in dry philosophical discussions. Hazra would say, "The world is unreal like a dream. Worship, food offerings to the deity, and so forth are only hallucinations of the mind. The aim of spiritual life is to meditate on one's own real self." Then he would repeat, "I am he." But with all that, he had a soft corner in his heart for money, material things, and people's attention. Sri Ramakrishna smiled and said to Hazra and Narendra, "Hello, what are you talking about?" Narendra smiling, "Oh, we're discussing a great many things. They are rather too deep for others." Master with a smile, "But pure knowledge and pure love are one and the same thing. Both lead the aspirants to the same goal. The path of love is much easier." Narendra quoted a song, "O mother, make me mad with thy love. What need have I have knowledge or reason?" Narendra said to M that he'd been reading a book by Hamilton, who wrote, "A learned ignorance is the end of philosophy and the beginning of religion." Master to M, "What does that mean?" Narendra explained the sentence in Bengali. The master beamed with joy and said in English, "Thank you, thank you." Everyone laughed at the charming way in which he used these words. They knew that his English vocabulary consisted in only half a dozen words. It was almost dusk when most of the devotees, including Narendra, took leave of the master. Sri Ramakrishna went out and looked at the Ganges for a few minutes from the western porch. Two priests were bathing in preparation for the evening worship. Young men of the village were strolling in the garden or standing on the concrete embankment, gazing at the murmuring river. Others, perhaps more thoughtful, were walking about in the solitude of the Panchavati. So this is giving you a little picture of the area just around Sri Ramakrishna's room. You can go down to the Ganges and see it. It's quite lovely. And then there's the garden in the back where the Panchavati is. It became dark. The maidservant lighted the lamp in Sri Ramakrishna's room and burnt incense. The evening worship began in the 12 temples of Shiva and the shrines of Krishna and Kali. As it was the first day after the full moon, the moonlight soon flooded the tops of the trees and temples and touched the river with numerous waves of the sacred river. The master returned to his room. After bowing to the Divine Mother, he clapped his hands and chanted the sweet names of God. A number of holy pictures hung on the walls of the room. Among others, there were pictures of Dhruva, Prahlada, Kali, Radhakrishna, and the coronation of Rama. These masters bowed low before the picture and repeated the holy names. Then he repeated the holy words, Brahma, Atma, Bhagavan, Bhakta, Bhagavan, Brahma, Shakti, Shakti, Brahma, Veda, Purana, Tantra, Gita, Gayatri. Then he said, I have taken refuge at thy feet, O Divine Mother. Not I, but thou. I am the machine and thou art the operator. And so on. While the Master was meditating in this fashion on the Divine Mother, a few devotees coming in from the garden gathered in his room. Sri Ramakrishna sat down on a small couch. He said to the devotees, Narendra, Bhavanath, Rakal, and devotees, like them, belong to the group of Nitya Siddhas. They are eternally free. Religious practices on their part is superfluous. Look at Narendra. He doesn't care about anyone. One day he was going with me in Captain's carriage. Captain wanted him to take a good seat, but Narendra didn't even look at him. He is independent, even of me. He doesn't tell me all he knows, lest I should praise his scholarship before others. He is free from ignorance and delusion. He has no bonds. He is a great soul. He has many good qualities. He is expert in music, both as a singer and a player, and is also a versatile scholar. Again, he keeps his promises, and he keeps his passions under control, and says he will never marry. There is a close friendship between Narendra and Bhavanath. They are just like a man and a woman. Narendra doesn't come here very often. That's good, for I am overwhelmed by his presence. So that was the end of that day. Monday, August 20th, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on his bed inside the mosquito net, meditating. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening. M was sitting on the floor with his friend, Hari Babu. Hari, a young man of 28, had lost his wife about 11 years before and had not married a second time. He was much devoted to his parents, brothers, and sisters. Hazra was living at Dakshineswar. Rakal lived with the master, though now and then he stayed at Adar's house. Narendra, Bhavanath, Adar M, Ram, Mahimohan, and other devotees visited the master almost every week. Hriday, Sri Ramakrishna's nephew, was ill in his home in the country, and the master was worried about him. One of the devotees had sent a little money, but the master did not know it. When Sri Ramakrishna came out of the mosquito net and sat on the small couch, the devotee saluted him. Master to M. I was meditating inside the net. It occurred to me that meditation, after all, was nothing but the imagining of a form, and so I did not enjoy it. One gets satisfaction if God reveals himself in a flash. Again I said to myself, who is it that meditates? And on whom does he meditate? M. Yes, sir, you said that God himself has become everything, the universe and all living beings. Even he who meditates is God. Master. What is more, one cannot meditate unless God wills it. One can meditate when God makes it possible for one to do so. What do you say? M. True, sir. You feel like that because there is no I in you. When there is no ego, one feels like that. Master, but it is good to have a trace of ego, which makes it possible for a man to feel that he is the servant of God. As long as a man thinks that it is he who is doing his duties, it is very good for him to feel that God is master and that he is God's servant. When one is conscious of doing work, one should establish with God the relationship of servant and master. M was always reflecting on the nature of the Supreme Brahman. Master to M, like the Akasha, Brahman is without any modification. It has become manifold because of Shakti. Again, Brahman is like fire, which itself has no color. The fire appears white if you throw white substance into it, and red if you throw red, black if you throw black. The three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, belong to Shakti alone. Brahman, itself is beyond the three gunas. What Brahman is cannot be described. It is beyond words. That which remains after everything is eliminated by the Vedantic process of not this, and which is of the nature of bliss, is Brahman. Suppose the husband of a young girl has come to his father-in-law's house and is seated in the drawing room with other young men of his age. The girl and her friends are looking at them through the window. Her friends do not know her husband and ask her, pointing to one young man, "Is that your husband?" "No," she answers, smiling. They point to another young man and ask, "Is he your husband?" Again, she answers, "No." They repeat the question, referring to a third, and she gives the same answer. At last, they point to her husband and ask, "Is he the one?" She says neither yes nor no, but only smiles and keeps quiet. Her friends realize that he is the one who is her husband. One becomes silent on realizing the true nature of Brahman. To M. Well, why do I talk so much? M. You talk in order to awaken spiritual consciousness of the devotees. You once said that when an uncooked luchi is dropped into boiling ghee, it makes a crackling noise. The master began to talk to M about Hazara. Master, do you know the nature of a good man? He never troubles others. He doesn't harass people. The nature of some people is that when they go to a feast, they want special seats. A man who has true devotion to God never makes a false step. He never gives trouble to others for nothing. It is not good to live in the company of bad people. One should stay away from them and thus protect himself. To M, isn't that so? M, yes, sir. The mind sinks far down in the company of the wicked, but is quite different with a hero, as you say. Master, how is that? When a fire is feeble, it goes out. Even a small stick thrown into it can put the fire out. But a blazing fire is not affected even when a plantain tree is thrown into it. The tree itself is burnt to ashes. The master asked M about his friend, Hari Babu. M. He has come here to pay you his respects. He lost his wife long ago. Master to Hari. What kind of work do you do? M. Nothing in particular, but at home he takes good care of his parents and his brothers and sisters. Master with a smile. How is that? You are like Elder the pumpkin cutter. You're neither a man of the world nor a devotee of God. That's not good. You must have seen this sort of elderly man who lives in a family and is always ready day and night to entertain the children. He sits in the parlor. He smokes a hubble bubble. But with nothing in particular to do, he leads a lazy life. Now and again, he goes to the inner court and cuts a pumpkin. For, since women do not cut pumpkins, they send the children to ask him to come do it. That's the extent of his usefulness, hence his nickname, Elder the Pumpkin Cutter. You must do this as well as that. Do your duties in the world, and also fix your mind on the lotus feet of the Lord. Read books of devotees like the Bhagavata or the Life of Chaitanya when you are alone and have nothing else to do. It was about 10 o'clock. Sri Ramakrishna finished a light supper of farina pudding and 1 or 2 luchis. After saluting him, Em and the friend took their leave. That's the end of that day. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, we're going on to one more day.
You can do another one, or you can...
I can do another one. Friday, September 7th, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna and M were talking in the master's room at 7:30 in the evening. No one else was present. Master, the other day I went to Calcutta. As I drove along the streets in the carriage, I observed that everyone's attention was fixed on low things. Everyone was brooding over their stomach or running after nothing but food. Everyone's mind was turned to woman and gold. I saw only 1 or 2 with their attention fixed on higher things, their minds turned to God. M. The present age has aggravated the stomach worry. Trying to imitate the English, people have turned their attention to more luxuries, and their wants have also increased. Master, what do the English think about God? They believe in a formless God. Master, that is also one of our beliefs. For a time, the master and disciple remained silent. Then Sri Ramakrishna began to describe his experience of Brahman. Master, one day I had the vision of consciousness, non-dual and indivisible. At first, it had been revealed to me that there were innumerable men, animals, and other creatures. Among them, there were aristocrats, the English, the Muslims, myself, scavengers, dogs, and a bearded Muslim with an earthenware tray of rice in his hand. He put a few grains of rice into everyone's mouth. I too tasted a little. Another day, I saw rice, vegetables, and other foodstuff, and filth and dirt as well, lying around. Suddenly, the soul came out of my body like a flame, and it touched everything. It was like a protruding tongue of fire, and it tasted everything once, even the excreta. But it was revealed to me that all these are one substance, the non-dual and indivisible consciousness. Another day it was revealed to me that I had devotees, my intimate companions, my very own. Thereafter I would climb to the roof of the cotir. As soon as the bells and conch shells of the evening worship sounded in the temples, I would cry out with a longing heart, "Oh, where are you? Come here. I'm dying to see you." To M. Well, what do you think of these visions? M. God sports through you. This I have realized, that you are the instrument and God is the master. God has created other beings as if with a machine, but you yourself he created with his own hands. Master. Well, Hazra says that after the vision of God, one acquires 6 divine powers. M. Those who seek pure love don't want powers. Master. Perhaps Hazra was a poor man in his previous life. That is why he wants so much to see the manifestation of power. He wants to know what I talk about with the cook. He says to me, You don't have to talk to the cook. I shall manage the temple myself and see that you get everything you want. M laughed aloud. He talks to me in that way, and I say nothing. M. Many a time I have said that a devotee who loves God for the sake of love does not care to see God's power. A true devotee wants to see God as Gopala. And there's a footnote here, the baby Krishna, who is bereft of all divine powers. In the beginning, God becomes the magnet and the devotee the needle. But in the end, the devotee himself becomes the magnet and God the needle. That is to say, God becomes smaller to his devotee. Master, yes, it is just like the sun at dawn. You can easily look at that sun. It doesn't dazzle the eyes, but rather it satisfies them. God becomes tender for the sake of his devotee. He appears before them, setting aside his powers. They both remain silent for some time. M. Why should your visions not be real? If they are unreal, then the world is even more unreal. For there is only one mind, and that is the instrument of perception. Your pure mind sees those visions, and our ordinary mind sees worldly objects. Master, I see you have grasped the idea of unreality. Well, tell me, what do you think about Hazra? M. Oh, I don't know. The Master laughs. M. Well, do you find me like anyone else? M. No, sir. Like any other Paramahamsa? M. No, sir. You cannot be compared to anyone else. Master, smiling. Have you heard of the tree called the Achina? And there's a footnote. It means unrecognizable, literally. M. No, sir. Master, there's a tree called by that name, but nobody knows what it is. Likewise, it is not possible to recognize you. The more a man understands you, the more uplifted he will be. M was silent. He said to himself, the Master referred to the sun at dawn and the tree unrecognizable by man. Did he mean that the incarnation of God? Is this the play of God through man? Is the Master himself an incarnation? Was this why he cried for the devotees from the roof of the kuti? Where are you? Come to me. So I'll stop there.
There is a question.
Okay.
You want to close the chant?
Okay. I'll close. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is he still the same.
So the question is, Mataji, thank you for your presence and a wonderful class. The question which has me on my mind is, how does one combine a non-dual jnana outlook with the bhakta outlook of the lover? Jnana and bhakti.
Okay. Through the meditation on the non-dual outlook, by saying not this, one develops dispassion and renunciation. And these are two of the qualities that are really needed, even for a bhakta. Because as you develop love for God, all the other things seem to fall away from you. And Sri Ramakrishna actually in his life gives us a wonderful example of what is called the Vijnani state. And that is someone who has gone beyond Nirvikalpa Samadhi and then come back down, where he sees it all as divine, and he is a bhakta. And they even quote, in different scriptures, they even quote that the real knowers of God, the real jnanis, are full of love. They're not just dry sadhus. If you've ever met anyone who has that kind of knowledge, you understand that they are full of sweetness and love. And your path, what you really need is to find a guru, and I'm hoping that you have one already, and that you can follow what he tells you, because that's the best thing, is to have guidance as you're trying to do your practices. But there are many basic practices which you can read about and can practice, and developing your character, of course, is extremely important, and ethical behavior. But the thing is to get a guru and get initiated, because that will help you immensely in your path, and you'll understand. Usually people, when they're given meditation instruction, are given both dual and non-dual, and they are given a part of it. Lots of people are given part of it meditating on some non-dualistic form of God, like the sky or something expansive and that doesn't really have form. And then you think about your chosen ideal and the form of the chosen ideal and meditate on that. And most gurus give that type of instruction. So talk to your guru and find out what he has to say. And thank you for listening.